All right, I think we're going to get started. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great to see such a good group of people together. I'm Sarah Swisher. I am with Epic Toledo and the Toledo Chamber. And we're really excited to kind of starting to get back into the swing of things and offer some virtual events for our members and for the community. So I do want to let you know that this session is going to be recorded. So if you know of anyone who would benefit from this or was interested and unable to attend, we'll make sure that the link gets out there. You're welcome to share this with them. We will be taking questions at the end of this session. If you want to go ahead and just drop your questions in the comment section. If you are wanting to remain more anonymous with maybe some of the questions that you have, you're welcome to just personally send them to me, Sarah Swisher. You can find me in the list and choose private. Send me those questions, and I will not be assigning any names to those. I will just be reading them as they come in at the end. So I would like to introduce to you our speaker today. It's Christina Joseph, a licensed profession clinical counselor in the state of Ohio. She holds a bachelor's degree in human development and family science from the Ohio State University and a master's degree in counselor education from the University of Toledo. Christina has worked as a clinical mental health counselor for adult patients participating in an opioid treatment program at the Zepf Center for 3.5 years. She specializes in treating addiction, trauma, and other mental health disorders and feels passionately about helping her clients navigate the healing process by connecting them with themselves and others. A little more information on the Zepf Center. It's been recognized as Best of Toledo's Drug Rehabilitation Facility by the Toledo City Paper. The Zepf Center has been a behavioral health and vocational services leader in our community for nearly 40 years. Certified by the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services and accredited by the Commission on Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities International, Zepf Center is where hope begins for adults and children who are facing mental health and addiction issues. I will also make sure to post the link to their website in the comments section. So if you want to learn more about the Zepf Center or get connected with any of their counselors like Christina that you're meeting today, I'm sure they'd be happy to do that. We really wanted to make sure that we partnered with someone in the community who could provide some ongoing support for our members. And we think the Zepf Center is the perfect partner to do that. So without further ado, please welcome Christina.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say I'm so honored to be here with you all on this Monday afternoon. I was hopeful by now that the weather would have turned for the better, but I've come to the realization, especially in light of recent events, that it's just much easier for me to invest my energy on things that I can control. Mother Nature's not one of those, so do what we can with that. When I was approached about this opportunity, I felt a bit overwhelmed. And being here right now with 50 people on a Zoom, I didn't even know that was possible, but I'm glad you're all here. It's pretty cool. But let me rephrase that. I guess I have been feeling increasingly overwhelmed for the past approximately 8 weeks. And I'm going to assume that it is reasonable to hypothesize that I'm not the only person on this webinar that has been feeling these uncomfortable emotions. For me, I think a big part of my increased anxiety that I've been experiencing has been stemming from the fact that I've had to continuously adjust to new life challenges on an almost daily basis. So when I initially spoke with Sarah about this webinar, she had shared some of the concerns that she personally had in response to this pandemic and the way that her life has been adjusted because of it. She also shared that she presumed members of Epic had some of the same concerns or stressors. Some of these stressors that Sarah described, they've seemed to become almost universal lately, in the sense that numerous individuals in our community, in our state, in our country have been impacted by these losses and changes that are going on because of this pandemic. These include things like unemployment. Some of you may have been fired or furloughed from work temporarily or permanently. feeling like you may have lost the ability to continue having a social life, being unable to meet friends at restaurants for dinner or even gather in person for one of your epic meetings, which it seems like you used to have meetings on a pretty regular basis. It's good that you're still able to have Zoom meetings, but it's not the same as being in person and having that human connection directly with people. Seeing increasingly bad news in the media, and then also not knowing how much news is healthy to watch and when it just becomes obsessive. Experiencing losses, high school, college, graduate school, graduations, sporting events, not knowing how to cope with these losses. Some of these things I've been seeing a lot in the media and the news and in our community about high school seniors and not having the ability to do things like go to prom or graduate or, you know, have those senior events that high schools have. And they may never get that opportunity again. So learning how, or maybe not even learning, but not knowing how to cope and process those losses. And then also things like fearing the unknown, not knowing when things are going to go back to normal, not knowing whether we will ever be back to our old normal again. We as human beings, we thrive on a sense of routine and normalcy. And, you know, that provides us with comfort. This pandemic has taken that away from all of us without any warning. And we've all been forced to adapt and adjust the best way that we've know how. Furthermore, each and every one of our lives are compiled of various aspects. So I facilitate groups for the clients that I work with at my job. And I always like to do this activity with them that helps them how to learn and understand simple ways to maintain balance in their lives. But before we even do that part of our activity, I usually have the clients start by filling in this graph to identify what the different components of their lives are. Because we're not in person, I don't have the graph, but just, you know, I ask that you just basically identify or imagine a pie or a pizza cut into different slices, and all those slices, pieces of the pizza or the pie, whichever you like better, pizza for me, but all those different slices can serve as different aspects of your life. So oftentimes when I help my clients fill in these pieces of the pie or the pizza, you know, it's their social life, their friends and their family, their jobs, occupational aspects, educational for some of them, family, exercising, sporting events, community involvement. You are all members of EPIC, and so that is a piece of your pie. So together, when you compile all those different pieces of the pie, it essentially is forming your life, which is creating your self-identity. When some, or all of these pieces are taken away from you, for instance, you lose your job on a moment's notice, or you're told by the government that you have to stay away from your friends and family for your and their safety for a while, we feel that a large part of our identity also is lost. This concept can and probably does apply to all of you present today. I know it applies to me. We all have probably stuck to some sort of schedule in our daily routines prior to the onset of this pandemic. And what we are seeing in response to this pandemic is that we have all been forced to make these changes in our lives. Our daily schedules have been forced to be adjusted. And this can cause an increase in our anxiety, which is essentially a normal reaction to an abnormal event. I personally, I'm now working remotely, so I'm providing telehealth services to my clients over the phone or over something like Zoom. It's not Zoom, but it's similar, whichever is more convenient for them. So I personally have noticed that I really miss the time that I used to spend driving home from work. At time, I never realized it when I was living in the moment, but it served as a cushion almost between like two different worlds. So I would leave work and drive home and I would reflect on my day. And when I got home, then I would focus on my personal life and my family. So that time helped me decompress and clear my mind. And it took me a while, again, I know I said this, to realize that, but once I realized it, I had to find other interventions to practice to help me find a way to decompress when I'm done with my clients for the day, because when I'm done with my clients, I now walk out of the room that I'm in and go to the other rooms of my house, and there's just no really end to the workday, it almost seems like, because I'm not leaving. Again, some of you have your cameras on and it looks like you may be at home, and so you may be experiencing something similar to that. I know that Sarah shared some of this while introducing me today, but I have spent the majority of my career specifically working with individuals that struggle from opioid dependence. However, many of these individuals also struggle from chronic anxiety and or depression. So for those of you that may be uncertain as to whether you are suffering from an anxiety or depressive disorder, or maybe not even an actual diagnosed disorder, but just maybe you're experiencing an increase in the anxiety or depression due to situational events like the coronavirus. So I would just like to share some warning signs that you should remain mindful and conscientious about. So if you feel like you have been feeling excessive anxiety or worry, and that you are finding it difficult to control that anxiety or worry, and that is occurring more days than not, that is a red flag for anxiety. Other things like being easily fatigued, feeling restlessness or keyed up or on edge, feeling super irritable, having difficulty concentrating or carrying out tasks that maybe to you used to be simple, but now no longer seem simple. Sleep disturbance, difficulty falling asleep or difficulty staying asleep, or an increased diminished interest in or pleasure in almost all activities for most of the day, and again, nearly every day. Also feeling extra sad or hopeless or just kind of empty most of the day, but also nearly every day. So those are some warning signs that we look at when we assess anxiety and depressive disorders. Again, I do want to clarify, these are just warning signs to be mindful about. If you can relate to some of these on some days, that does not necessarily mean that you are struggling with anxiety or depression. It is more so when it becomes, when you notice that it is impacting your ability to carry out your day-to-day tasks and function on a daily basis, then it may be useful for you to talk to your medical provider, or as Sarah said, she's going to provide, she's going to provide, I was reading these messages. I'm not great at Zoom, so I'm learning. But she is going to provide our link to the Zepf Center, and we can also connect you with further information if you do have concerns about those disorders. Someone shared, you can share your screen if you want to show graphics, but unfortunately I didn't prepare a PowerPoint. I just have like a mess of notes written down on a Microsoft Word page. So I'm not going to share that, but maybe I can submit something to Sarah that she can show or send to you all afterwards. So, in response to those symptoms that I just described, I talk about those with my clients when they come into treatment, when I work with them both individually in counseling sessions, but also in groups. And once we are able to identify how they are feeling, so, you know, and maybe some of you can relate, maybe in response to the coronavirus and your life being impacted and adjusted, maybe you are noticing that you're not able to concentrate. Maybe you're noticing that you're just not overly happy like you used to be. Maybe you're feeling more isolated and more restless because of it. So I help my clients to identify how they are feeling so we can put a label on what it is to help them better understand. Once we do that, I then help them learn and understand just brief solution-focused strategies that they can practice to help them manage these negative symptoms that pertaining to anxiety and depression. So these techniques that I help them learn and understand, in simple terms, in the counseling world, they're what we call coping skills. The word coping can essentially be defined as using your own conscious effort to solve problems, personal problems, interpersonal problems, in order to try to minimize the stress or the conflict that comes from the problem. So some examples of coping skills include exercising, writing in a journal, drawing, coloring, listening to music, taking a bath, going on a walk, weather permitting sometimes, lately weather permitting, spending time in nature, cleaning your house. Some of these, they may seem like common sense, but what I have come to learn through my work is that a lot of these, the ones I just named, they're really not common sense. And personally, I'm kind of a victim of that. I can spell all those out for you. I can identify all of these great coping skills that help with anxiety and depression and help us feel better. But it's more so not about identifying them as it is about practicing them. And I think that that's what I can say. You know, I don't practice them all the time when I'm anxious. And especially with, you know, some of our generations, I think that it's a lot easier to have a glass of wine after work or when you're feeling stressed out. We are seeing a huge increase in, again, relating to the population that I work with that struggle with substance use disorders. We're seeing a huge increase in relapse during this time of isolation. They're cut off from their support networks. From, you know, a lot of my clients go to sober support meetings in the community. They also come to groups at the Zepf Center where I work. That human connection and interaction is so important, more important than we realize. You all attend EPIC meetings together. Again, I do think you guys are still doing them on Zoom, but it's not the same as being in person with each other. And when we don't have that human connection, we can feel isolated. And that is oftentimes when relapse for the population that I work with has been occurring. So those coping skills, and there's hundreds of coping skills that I could name off. Sometimes they're not as easy to do as going to the store and buying alcohol and drinking it, because it seems to make us feel better at the time and not stress as much. But when that alcohol wears off, the anxiety increases. Sarah, were there any questions related to anything that I just talked about?
Yes, I had one that someone, you know, was really hearing the whole inability to decompress after work, since leaving, you know, you're not actually leaving, and having that time and space. So do you have any recommendations of activities or thought process we can employ to make these separations or to enhance our ability to decompress?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And that is something that I have had to learn myself through trial and error. Again, once I identified, oh, this is what's wrong. I don't feel like I have that time to decompress. Oops. You know, so I then have had to figure out ways to help me decompress. So For me personally, and again, weather permitting, going on walks has really helped me just feel like I'm leaving my house for a little bit, especially when I'm off work. It's nice. I've kind of tried to make that a routine and go on a walk or go outside and do something. And so going on walks or bike rides, also even just calling somebody, a close friend, a family member, and going outside and talking to them on the phone. Just removing yourself from being inside all day while you're working, and then after work, whatever you're doing at home, watching silly TV or reading, so finding a way to leave your house, even if it's leaving your house and going on your backyard or outside of your backyard or your front porch or whatever it may be, and talking to someone to distract yourself and just feel like you're leaving. Somebody asked me if there are any coping methods that I would recommend for people who struggle with ADHD or who have trouble focusing for long periods of time. So I see someone giving a thumbs up. Personally, I feel like I struggle with focusing for long periods of time. And I have been doing jigsaw puzzles, which has really helped me. Gotten very good at the 1,000-piece puzzles. And I have a swap going on with my mom. We just kind of drop off new puzzles to each other every couple weeks. And so puzzles have helped me. I also think that creating a list every day, it can be as little as 3 things on your list that you want to accomplish. Sometimes it's better to just have 3 things, 5 things. When you have too many things, we then are kind of setting ourselves up for failure because we're not going to accomplish all of those things in one day. So every day, creating a list with 3 things that you want to do, whether it's cleaning out the junk drawer in your kitchen or, giving yourself a manicure or a haircut or planting new plants, exercising, whatever it may be. But making a list and trying to check those 3 things off your list every day.
That's great. I have another one. How do you manage everyone else's anxiety and stress when you're having a tough time? So some of us, might have family staying with us, a partner, family, kids. And I think everyone, in my experience is processing this different in my family. So how do you, manage other people and kind of their imposing anxiety and stress into you, and what happens if you leave these issues unaddressed?
The issues with your family and friends?
Well, that might just be overall. That was another question. That was a separate question, maybe.
So, and that's a really good question. And yeah, it's interesting to hear that question because, again, that's something that I can relate to even before this pandemic, but just as the role of a mental health counselor all day, every day. Sometimes some days are worse than others where I feel like I'm ShamWowing everybody's stress and I need to be wrung out. And so it is, and it's been 3.5 years in the making for me to even be able to get to this point, but it really is about balance and boundaries. And if you feel like you are experiencing more stress one day than you are another day, and your family members or your friends are also trying to call you to talk about their stress, it's really about staying in tune with yourself and knowing how much can you handle, because we can't help anybody else with their stress, their anxiety, their life problems if we are struggling from those same things. And so some days your go-to person may not be your go-to person to talk if they are experiencing as much or more stress than you are, because they're just going to make you more stressed out. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I can't talk today, or I can't talk right now, and I'll call you tomorrow. And, you know, that's not you being a bad friend or a bad family member. That's you taking care of yourself. And we can't fix everybody's problems, especially if we can't even fix our own. It's kind of like, I always think about the analogy of when you're on an airplane and the steward or the stewardess does the safety speech at the beginning, and they talk about, you know, in the event of the plane going down, the oxygen masks will come out of the top of the plane. And they always talk about, you know, if you have a child next to you, who do you put the oxygen mask on first? Do you put it on your child first, or do you put it on you first? And they instruct you to put it on you first, because you can't save your children if you can't breathe yourself. And so I often think back to that metaphor. It's something that I learned back when I was in school, and it's helped me tremendously regain focus when I'm overwhelmed about my boundaries and what I can and can't do. And sometimes we want to save the world and save everybody, and we just can't. So definitely knowing your limitations, knowing how much you can handle, and telling people, you know, maybe you're always the one that is listening to others and not talking about how you feel. And maybe even just saying, I need to talk about what I'm feeling today. One second, I'm reading these. So one of the questions that I had was, that I received was, what are some of the warning signs that we can look for in coworkers? Especially because right now we are using virtual meetings. A lot of you are using virtual meetings. I'm using virtual meetings with my coworkers. And it's interesting, the individual that asked me this said, we can't directly and easily observe their body language. So when we moved to telehealth, we had to take some continuing education regarding it. And one of the biggest things that they talked about in the trainings that we were doing was the fact that it is crucial when doing telehealth that we have to learn other ways to assess our clients, because you can't always see the body language. So right now, my leg could be bouncing crazily and you guys would have no idea because you can't see my legs. So, some of the warning signs that I think it's important to be mindful about are appearance. If you're in a work meeting and there's always somebody who's never turning their camera on, I guess my question would be, why aren't they turning their camera on? Are they not taking care of themselves? Are they not, tending to their basic needs? And are they, if they do have their camera on, and you just notice that they still look like they're not tending to their basic needs. Maybe they look like they have bags underneath their eyes and they're not sleeping much. Maybe they're not as involved in the virtual meetings as they usually are back when things were normal. Their personality maybe has changed. The amount of eye contact they make is more limited. So those are all some warning signs. The other thing is, depending on the relationships that you had with your coworkers prior to moving remotely, if you used to talk with them on a regular basis, and you have it, I would encourage you to call them, call their cell phone, check in with them on a regular basis, text them and just ask, how are things going? And if they're not answering, or if they're not responding, that's another huge warning sign. And if you have tried those things and you feel like the coworker is not really responding to those interventions, I would suggest either sharing your concerns with your supervisor, or even depending on your relationship with the individual, sharing your concerns with that individual that's struggling. That's a good question. And that's something that I've noticed as well with some of my coworkers. It's, we are all trying to adjust and adapt and without really being taught how to adjust and adapt in the event of a pandemic. Sarah, do you have another question?
I do not.
Okay. So I have one more that talks about a lot of stress coming from worrying about their children handling a complete life change, you know, moving to distance learning, not being able to get out with their friends. And they're interested in wondering if I have any coping methods for moms or dads to help deal with this. And I have a daughter, but she is only 5.5 months old. So I have not personally experienced the stress that individuals are feeling because their children are home all day. However, I have empathy towards those that are experiencing this. And what I tell my clients, my friends who are dealing with this is to, one, have less expectations than you normally may have. I think that we all, as parents especially, we want to fix everything and help our children and make sure that everything's okay. We also, again, as we are trying to cope with our anxiety about this pandemic, we sometimes will forget that our children notice. They notice how much we have the TV on, how much we're watching the news, how we're reacting to that news. They're wondering, depending on their age, why they can't go see their friends, why they're not in school. It's really important for both the parents and the children to make time to do things together as a family. It's interesting, like being home all day with my family members. I still feel like some days I don't interact with them as much as my head tells me I should have been because I was home all day with them. It's like this weird concept that I try to understand. I'm, you know, along with many others going on right now. But so making time to do things with your family, having a family game night, a family dinner, making sure you're sitting down together at the table and eating or even cooking the dinner together. And, you know, I've been kind of joking with my clients because I've spent, you know, the years that I've been working with them telling them it's really important that you limit the amount of time your child is on technology. Now I'm like, no rules exist. Just let them be on their technology if they want to be on their technology. And so that kind of just goes back to the lowering the expectations that you have and that you may be projecting onto your children, knowing that they're doing the best that they can and you're doing the best that you can. In light of everything that's going on. I hope that helped for the individual that asked that question.
Yeah, someone also added in the comments to everyone that for maybe some additional information on that, there is a free webinar this Wednesday at noon called Parents as Teachers, How to Keep Your Sanity, for anyone who may be interested.
Yeah, that's a good resource.
And then I do see another question. How can I explain to others that working at home is actually working and related conflicts, etc. Expectations that those working at home take on additional duties, chores, etc. just because they happen to be at home even though they're working. So kind of how do you maybe set time aside? How do you you know, maybe convey that to others in the household that, you know, there might be set time for work that you're not able to go and make lunches for everyone or do some laundry. You know, I think we're all multitaskers, but working from home really puts that in a new light, right? And sometimes I even find myself avoiding some work or phone calls because all of a sudden my bathroom really needs to be cleaned. So I don't know if others are experiencing that, but it looks like there's kind of a question related to that.
So yeah, and I'm reading it again. and I'm wondering, how can I communicate, explain to others that working at home? So communicating, explaining to the others in your home, or the others just in general, I guess regardless of who it is that you are explaining it to. You know, I still feel like I'm trying to explain it to my family members, and my sister, who is very bored working from home, doesn't have as high maintenance of a job as I have. And so sometimes I feel like working from home has been a lot more difficult. And then I also, you know, going back to what I was saying, how it's this weird concept, like earlier when I was mentioning that I'm home with my family members all day, then I'm like, I feel like I haven't spent any time with them, but I should have been, because I'm with them. I'm just not talking with them. So it's one of those weird concepts. You're at home all day working. So you know, as Sarah said, feel like your bathroom should be sparkling clean and all the laundry should be done because you're at home all day, but you are working all day. And it can be difficult for those that are in your household that are unemployed, whether it's children or somebody else that you're living with that is not currently working, or others that don't live with you but that want your attention throughout the day. It can be challenging to explain to them, I'm still working. Almost like you want to wear a camera on your head and have them just see how much work you're actually still doing, despite the fact that you're at home. And so again, even though they are working. Okay, so I think that it goes back to the boundaries. Boundaries is like one of the most common words, overused words in counseling, in the world of counseling, but it's so applicable, and it's so important to have those boundaries. Boundaries and balance in your life. Going back to that pizza pie that I talked about at the beginning, work is a part of the individual who asked this question, and it's a part of my pizza pie. And so we have to still give enough attention to that. And others who may not understand it, I think it's just about being firm and reiterating, I'm working, I can't do these things now. And if they continue to not understand, I think it's just repeating to them, I'm working. Don't try to do everything that they want you to do while you are working, because then they're not going to understand that your job is taking time and that you don't have the time to do those things. Do them when you do have the time. Yeah. So somebody else shared that they have a lot of anxiety thinking about long-term with this pandemic. There is so much unknown, and they're stressing over the unknown and the uncontrollable. So that's a very good question. And I think that it is, you know, Sarah and I were talking about this when we touched base prior to this webinar, and she kind of shared a little bit about that as well. So what you are feeling and the anxiety that you are having in response to the unknown is so normal. And so again, it's a normal reaction to an abnormal event. I say that I know that it's not going to make your anxiety go away, but I'm saying it to make you feel better and more validated about the fact that is almost right now a universal feeling of what is going to happen in our future. However, there's this concept, and it's called the Locus of Control. It's a psychological concept, and it refers to how strongly people believe that they have control over the situations and the experiences that affect their lives. So, the concept Locus of Control, it's unfamiliar to most people. However, once it's defined, it's more commonly understood. It's literally things that are in your control versus the things that are not in your control. It's usually divided into two categories, internal and external. The internal locus of control are the things that you can control. The external locus of control are things that you cannot control. And sometimes, you know, maybe up until now, you haven't really had to think about the internal, external locus of control. Or maybe you have and you just haven't really noticed that you've had to. So internal locus of control, things that you can control. These are things like your thoughts, your emotions to a certain extent, and your beliefs. The external locus of control, things that you can't control. These are things like the weather, and then other people's thoughts and beliefs and emotions, things that other people say to you. You can't control that, but you can control how you react to it. You can't control natural disasters or even man-made disasters. But again, it goes back to this internal locus of control. What we can control is how we react to these situations. So I'm going to go back to my, like, referencing watching the news. Most of the things that I have been seeing on the news, and I actually have not been watching the news that much because I don't have cable and because I have been working and don't have time usually when the governor goes on. And so, but the things that I have seen, what I've seen on the news, have typically been like horror stories, or, you know, how people have been so negatively impacted by the coronavirus. And it's all real and it's all true, but I haven't seen as much focus on the people that have, you know, survived the coronavirus, the things that people have been doing to support one another during this time. All of those positive stories I would like to see more of and less of the negative stuff. We can't control what's going to go on the news. We can't control what people are saying. We can't control those statistics. You can control how much news you have on, though. And you can control, you know, thinking, or when you find your mind wandering to what is going to happen long term, are things going to be normal? Is there going to be a second wave of this virus and a second wave of the quarantine? When you find your mind going to that, try your best to just stop, take some deep breaths. You know, there's some grounding techniques like tell yourself 5 things that you can see. That helps you kind of ground and regain focus. And then just try to, once you find yourself calm down, if you find your mind is spiraling and you're wondering all these whys and what happens and what ifs, ground yourself and then focus on what can I control. I can control how much I watch the news. I can control how much I go out into the public right now. I can control if I wear a mask. I can control staying 6 feet away from people. Focusing on those things and telling yourself what you can control. I hope that helped, because that's something that I have to do on a regular basis. Locus of control, internal, external. You may be even able to Google the locus of control and it may give you some good explanations about it. But like, I find prior to this pandemic, I use the locus of control when I'm driving to work and there's an accident or there's construction and everybody, you know, and I'm sitting in it and I'm like, I'm going to be late for work. I have to be at work. Oh my gosh, all these people, this is terrible. And I just have to stop, ground myself and say, you know, thank goodness it wasn't me in that accident. Everybody else in this traffic jam right now also is probably freaking out about going to work. So it helps me just kind of regain focus and think about what is in my control. Are there any other questions? I was reading some of these. I appreciate all of your questions, and I hope that I was able to provide some support. I think that it truly is amazing how many people are here today and present on this. And you know, I hope that even just by being here and seeing some of our faces and some of some of our names on here, I hope that it helps you just feel a sense of connection and even just a sense of validation that, you know, yes, we are all experiencing anxiety and stress in response to this, a lot of unknowns, but we're not alone in those feelings. So again, it doesn't make it go away and it doesn't necessarily make it better, but I think that it does help me knowing that I'm not alone in this, and that focusing on what you control, what you can control, trying to challenge those irrational or racing or thoughts about the unknown, knowing that we do thrive as a society, as human beings, on normalcy and routine, and we have been forced to adapt to a new routine. And sometimes it's, you know, I've been working from home for like 8 weeks almost, and I still feel like I don't have a routine some days. I've noticed that some days, you know, my first client is at 7 a.m. and some mornings I'm still asleep at 6:15. And it's, you know, then there's some days where I'm going to bed later than I used to. And, you know, I take into consideration, well, I don't have to drive to work, so I don't have to factor that in, so I can sleep more, but it throws me off that routine. And so I think that trying your best to keep a routine, trying to still eat healthy, trying to, you know, not drink in excess and not drink alone. And then reaching out to your support, calling your friends and family, getting out of the house when you can. If it's a nice day, go on a walk, go on your back porch, call your loved ones, talk to them, and also make sure that you talk about how you are feeling. Sometimes we have thoughts that rumble around our heads and we don't identify those thoughts and we don't label those feelings, but once we do that, it makes us feel so much better. Identifying the problem and then solving it. Oh, 9 new messages. Okay, so I think
a lot of them are singing your praises, Christina. We just really, really appreciate you joining us today and being willing to really have a conversation with us. I think that I really like how this turned out, and this is as close to a group conversation I think that we've been able to have in a long time. So it gives me some hope and faith that that, you know, we can still have some of this engagement in a virtual setting. So thank you. Any last words before I end with some resources for people here?
I'm glad that you all found this helpful. I really am. Someone said, I'm ready to take a walk to the river. Me too. I'm right there with you. 6 feet apart, but we can do it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, thank you again. As if you look in the comments, you'll see the website for Zepf Center. So that's a continuing resource for you for mental health questions and support for you and others within our community. I'm sure they would say don't hesitate when reaching out to them. I also want to do a special shout out to Carlos and Kitty for helping set this up at the Zepf Center. We really appreciate all of your help and support and everything that you're doing within our community. I also would like to invite everyone to play Pictionary with Epic Toledo this Thursday evening from 5 to, I don't know if we put 5 to 6:30 or 7 o'clock, but you can check that out on our website, epictoledo.com. We're going to be adding more virtual events as the weeks go on. So just keep checking back there. And if you're a member, you'll get that to you in an email. Next week, we have an event with United Way talking about the community support, funding, and programming that they're doing to help those through these challenging times. Such an overused phrase, but accurate nonetheless. Also, additional resources for you for your business. We have the Small Business Development Center at the Toledo Chamber that's working to help get, you know, really the economy rebooted, business counseling, no cost, free service. So if you're interested in any of those resources or speaking to a counselor or know anyone who could benefit from that, as I mentioned, it is a free service, toledochamber.com. And I think someone threw the EA in there as well, helping our businesses with all the HR needs that they have in our community. So thank you out there for the great work that you're doing. And we hope to see you again soon. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care. Thanks.
Bye. Stay safe. Stay healthy.